The foreclosure notice trembled violently in my mother's hands, a stark contrast to the framed photograph sitting proudly on the mantel. In it, my brother Tristan flashed a carefree grin from the deck of a yacht in Dubai. My parents had willingly incinerated their life savings to finance his delusions of grandeur, and yet they were looking at me to somehow pick up the check. In our family, there was a universal truth that dictated the orbit of our lives. The sun rose and set on my older brother, Tristan. I, Mia, was merely a satellite, expected to stay quietly in the background and not disrupt the gravitational pull of his supposed greatness. My parents, Percival and Beatrice, weren't overtly cruel. They didn't lock me in a cupboard under the stairs. Their favoritism was much more insidious. It was the kind that slowly chips away at your self-worth, masked as support for a boy who just needed a little extra help to reach his potential. The financial discrepancy started early. When Tristan graduated high school with a barely there 2.4 GPA, a brand new BMW 3 Series magically appeared in our driveway. He needs a reliable car for college, my dad had argued, beaming at his son. 2 years later, when I graduated as valedictorian and secured a partial scholarship to a state university, I was handed the keys to a rusted 15-year-old Honda Civic with a broken AC. "It builds character, sweetie," my mother had chirped. During college, I worked 30 hours a week waiting tables to cover the rest of my tuition and rent. I remember eating ramen noodles for a week straight because my textbooks cost more than expected. Meanwhile, Tristan dropped out of 3 different majors, changed universities twice, and lived in a luxury off-campus apartment fully funded by the bank of Mum and Dad. Whenever I gently questioned it, the response was always the same. "Tristan is finding himself. You're the independent one, Mia. You don't need us. They were right about one thing." I became fiercely independent. I had to. I graduated with a degree in finance, landed a solid job at a mid-sized firm in Chicago, and married Liam. Liam was a structural engineer, quiet, grounded, and the complete opposite of my flashy, loud-mouthed brother. When Liam and I got married, we paid for our own modest, beautiful ceremony in a botanical garden. We invited 50 people. My parents gifted us a mid-range toaster and a check for $500, apologizing that things were a bit tight right now. I didn't mind the small gift. I minded the lie. Because exactly 6 months later, Tristan proposed to Savannah. Savannah was an aspiring lifestyle influencer whose primary talent was spending money she didn't have. For their wedding, tight finances were miraculously forgotten. It was a $120,000 spectacle at a historic country club, complete with a 6-tier cake, an ice sculpture of a swan, and a designer dress that cost more than my entire first year of college tuition. I was a bridesmaid, forced into a hideous champagne-colored gown, smiling until my jaw ached. During the reception, I overheard my mother talking to her sister, Aunt Carol. "Percival took out a second mortgage," my mother whispered, her voice a mix of anxiety and pride. "But look at them. They look like royalty. Tristan is on the verge of landing a massive consulting deal. He'll pay us back double by next year." I remember standing frozen near the champagne fountain. A second mortgage. My parents were in their late 50s. Dad was a regional manager for a logistics company, and Mum worked part-time as a receptionist. They lived comfortably, but they were not wealthy. They were borrowing against their own roof to buy an ice swan that was currently melting onto a silver platter. I told Liam about it on the drive home. He squeezed my hand, keeping his eyes on the road. "It's their money, Mia," he said gently. "Or, well, their debt. You can't save people who don't want to be saved." We just have to focus on us." So I did. Over the next 4 years, Liam and I worked hard. We bought a modest 3-bedroom fixer-upper in the suburbs. We budgeted, we saved, we put money into our 401ks, and we prepared for the future. I got promoted to senior financial analyst. We lived a quiet, secure, drama-free life. Tristan, on the other hand, was living a life straight out of a hip-hop music video. If you looked at his Instagram, you'd think he was a billionaire. There were trips to the Maldives, courtside tickets to NBA games, and a wrist heavy with a gleaming Rolex. He claimed he was the CEO of a disruptive tech consulting firm. But whenever I asked him what exactly his company did, he would throw around buzzwords like synergy, blockchain, and B2B optimization without ever finishing a coherent sentence. I kept my distance. We saw my parents at Thanksgiving and Christmas. During those dinners, Percival and Beatrice would hang on Tristan's every word, nodding enthusiastically as he bragged about pending million-dollar contracts. They never asked about my promotion. They never asked about Liam's bridge project. They just served Tristan the biggest slice of pie and beamed. I thought I had made peace with it. I thought I had successfully detached myself from their toxic dynamic. I was wrong. The phone call came on a Tuesday night in November, right as a bitter chill was settling over Chicago. Liam was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner, and I was on the couch, finishing up an email on my laptop. When my phone vibrated, I saw my mother's contact photo flash on the screen. It was 7:45 p.m. My parents never called on weeknights unless it was an emergency. My stomach dropped. "Mum?" I answered. There was a ragged, gasping sob on the other end. "Mia," she choked out. "You need to come. It's your father. We're at Mercy General." I didn't ask questions. I grabbed my coat, yelled for Liam, and we sped to the hospital. 1,000 terrifying scenarios played out in my head. A car crash, a stroke. When we rushed into the emergency room waiting area, I found my mother pacing near the vending machines, clutching a shredded tissue. She looked like she had aged 10 years. "Mum, what happened?" I asked, grabbing her shoulders. "Is he okay?" "It's his heart," she sobbed. "A severe stress-induced angina attack. They thought it was a myocardial infarction, but they've stabilized him. They're keeping him overnight." I exhaled a massive breath of relief. Okay, he's stable. That's what matters. What triggered it? Was he overworking?" My mother couldn't meet my eyes. She looked down at the linoleum floor, her hands shaking violently. "It was the mail, Mia. He opened the mail." "The mail?" Liam asked, frowning. "What was in the mail, Beatrice?" She burst into fresh tears. "The foreclosure notice, and the summons from the IRS." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. "Foreclosure? Mum, what are you talking about? You guys have lived in that house for 30 years. The mortgage was almost paid off before—" I stopped, remembering the whispered conversation at Tristan's wedding. "Before the second mortgage. Mum, how far behind are you?" She finally looked up, and the absolute terror in her eyes chilled me to the bone. 6 months. But that's not all of it, Mia. That's not even the worst part. She insisted we go back to their house to get Dad's overnight things, promising to explain everything there. When we walked into my childhood home, the air felt stale. My mother led me into my father's small home office. It looked like a bomb had gone off. Folders were ripped open, bank statements were scattered across the desk, and a calculator sat atop a pile of red-stamped envelopes. Because of my background in finance, it took me less than 20 minutes of sorting through the paperwork to piece together the gruesome puzzle of my parents' financial ruin. As I read the numbers, a cold, hard knot formed in my stomach, quickly igniting into blinding rage. Tristan's tech consulting firm had never turned a profit. It was a black hole of leased office space, expensive client dinners, and massive ego. When the bank stopped lending to Tristan, he went to the only ATM that never denied him: Percival and Beatrice. Over the last 3 years, my parents had systematically gutted their entire financial existence to keep Tristan afloat. They hadn't just taken out a second mortgage for the wedding, they had taken out a massive home equity line of credit, HELOC, to fund Tristan's seed round. When that ran dry, they cashed out Dad's 401k early, eating the massive tax penalties. "Mum," I whispered, holding up a statement, "you have $60,000 in credit card debt, and Dad owes the IRS $45,000 because you didn't hold back taxes on the retirement withdrawal." "Tristan said it was a bridge loan," she wailed, burying her face in her hands. "He said the app was going public. He promised he was going to buy us a mansion in Florida. He had charts, Mia. He had a PowerPoint." "A PowerPoint?" I snapped, my voice rising. "Mum, you bankrupt yourselves for a PowerPoint? Where is he? Have you called him?" "I tried," she sniffled. "It goes straight to voicemail. Savannah blocked my number." Liam, who had been silently reviewing a stack of auto loan documents, cleared his throat. "Mia, it gets worse." He handed me a piece of paper. "Your parents didn't just give him cash, they co-signed." I looked at the document. It was a lease agreement for 2 luxury vehicles, a Range Rover and a Porsche Macan, both in Tristan's name, both co-signed by Percival, both severely delinquent. "They're taking the cars," Mum whispered, "and the bank is taking the house in 30 days if we don't cure the default. We have exactly $412 in our checking account. We have nothing left, Mia. We are completely wiped out." I sat back in my father's leather chair, staring at the woman who had told me a rusted-out Honda Civic built character. They were nearly $500,000 in the hole, all to subsidize the fake luxury lifestyle of a grown man who wouldn't even answer their phone calls while his father lay in a hospital bed. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Why didn't you call me a year ago when you missed the first mortgage payment?" "We didn't want to bother you," she deflected, though I knew the real answer. They were ashamed, and they wanted to protect Tristan's image at all costs. She reached across the desk and grabbed my hands. Her grip was tight, desperate. "Mia, please. You're our only hope. We know you and Liam make good money. We know you live below your means. If you could just front us $85,000 to clear the mortgage arrears and the IRS debt, we can figure out the rest. We'll pay you back. I swear it." I stared at her, utterly paralyzed by the audacity. They wanted me, the daughter they had financially ignored and emotionally sidelined, to empty my hard-earned savings, money Liam and I were saving to start a family, to clean up Tristan's mess. Before I could even formulate the word no, the front door of the house banged open. Heavy, frantic footsteps echoed in the hallway. Tristan burst into the office. He looked entirely disheveled. His designer suit was wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and he smelled faintly of stale whiskey and panic. He didn't look at me. He looked directly at our mother. "Mom," he breathed, wide-eyed. "Savannah took the dogs and went to her sister's. The repo guys just towed the Porsche from my driveway. I need you and Dad to write me a check right now, or I'm going to lose everything." The silence in my father's office was so absolute, so suffocating, that for a split second, I thought I had gone deaf. Tristan stood in the doorway, breathing heavily, entirely consumed by his own manufactured crisis. He hadn't asked where Dad was. He hadn't noticed my mother's tear-streaked face, or the fact that she was trembling so violently her teeth were practically chattering. All he saw was the bank of Mom and Dad, and he was here to make a withdrawal. "Tristan," my mother whispered, her voice cracking into a horrified rasp. Your father is in the hospital. He had a heart attack tonight." For a fleeting second, a flicker of something resembling human emotion crossed my brother's perfectly manicured face, but it was quickly swallowed by his own panic. "What? Is he okay?" He didn't wait for an answer, running a frantic hand through his hair. "Look, I'll go see him tomorrow first thing, I swear. But Mum, you have to understand, my accounts are frozen." Savannah left me a voicemail saying she's taking the remaining cash from our joint account to pay for a divorce lawyer. "I need $20,000 to keep the company's servers online and the repo men away from the rover. Just write me a check, and I'll pay you back when my venture capital comes through on Friday," I snapped. 30 years of biting my tongue, 30 years of playing the dutiful, quiet background character to the Tristan show erupted from my chest in a wave of blinding, white-hot fury. I stood up, grabbing the stack of red-stamped foreclosure notices, and threw them as hard as I could right at his chest. The papers exploded around him like miserable, debt-ridden confetti. "There is no check, Tristan," I screamed, the raw volume of my voice making both him and my mother flinch. "There is no money. They are bankrupt. You bled them dry, you parasitic fraud." Tristan blinked, looking down at the papers on the floor, and then back up at me, his lip curling into a sneer. "Mia, stay out of this. You don't understand high finance or how startups work. It takes capital to build an empire." "I am a senior financial analyst," I yelled, stepping out from behind the desk, closing the distance between us until I was inches from his face. "I understand math, and I understand a Ponzi scheme of a lifestyle when I see one. You don't have a company, Tristan. You have a glorified Instagram account, funded by your parents' retirement. They took out a second mortgage for your wedding. They cashed out Dad's 401k. They co-signed your luxury cars. They have exactly $412 to their name, and the bank is taking this house in 30 days. Tristan's face drained of color. He looked over my shoulder at our mother, expecting her to coddle him, to tell him I was exaggerating. But Beatrice just covered her face with her hands and sobbed, a wretched, broken sound. "Mom," Tristan stammered, stepping back. "Mom, tell her she's lying. You guys have the mutual funds, the lake house inheritance." "Gone," Liam said, quietly from the corner of the room. It was the first time my husband had spoken, and his deep, calm voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "Every single asset they had was liquidated to cover your bridge loans over the last 3 years. The well is dry, Tristan. You broke them." Panic, pure and unadulterated, finally set into my brother's eyes. But instead of apologizing, instead of falling to his knees and begging for forgiveness for putting his father in the cardiac ward, his survival instinct kicked in. And Tristan's survival instinct was entirely narcissistic. He turned his glare onto me. "Well, what about you? You and Liam make 6 figures. You don't even have kids yet. You sit in your cheap little house hoarding your cash. Help them out. Write the check, Mia." "Don't you dare," Liam warned, stepping forward, his shoulders squared. "Don't you dare speak to my wife like that." I put a hand on Liam's arm, stopping him. I wanted to handle this. I looked at my brother, then at my mother, who was looking up at me with those same desperate, pleading eyes from 20 minutes ago. "Listen to me very carefully," I said, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. "I am not giving you a dime, not a single, solitary cent." "Mia, please," my mother cried out. "It's our house. It's your childhood home." I turned to her, my heart breaking into a million pieces, but I forced the steel into my spine. "Mum, if I pay this $85,000, what happens next month? And the month after that? You have no retirement income. You have $60,000 in credit card debt. Even if I drain my savings to save this house today, you will lose it in 6 months anyway. And then Liam and I won't have a future either. You made your choice. For 30 years, you chose him. Now he can save you." "I can't," Tristan yelled, his voice cracking hysterically. "I'm ruined, Mia. Savannah is taking everything." "Then you better start looking for a job that pays hourly," I replied coldly. I picked up my purse and Liam's coat. "I will hire a bankruptcy attorney for you and Dad, Mum. I will pay the retainer fee directly to the lawyer. That is the beginning and the end of my financial assistance. I'll meet you at the hospital tomorrow." We walked out, leaving the golden boy standing in the ruins of the empire he had built on our parents' backs. The fallout over the next 6 months was the most spectacular, devastating train wreck I had ever witnessed. Karma didn't just knock on my brother's door, it drove a bulldozer through his life. The biggest twist came 3 weeks after my father was discharged from the hospital with a stent in his heart. Savannah, Tristan's beloved influencer wife, didn't just divorce him. She eviscerated him publicly. She went on Instagram Live to her 200,000 followers, crying beautifully constructed, mascara-free tears. She claimed she was the victim of severe financial deception. She told the world that Tristan had lied about his wealth, that all her designer bags were actually fakes he had bought in back alleys, and that he had trapped her in a mountain of debt. She legally changed her name back to her maiden name and took the remaining cash from their accounts to flee to Los Angeles. Tristan's reputation in his precious, high society circles was obliterated overnight. He became a laughingstock, but the public humiliation was only the appetizer. The main course was the legal system. When the bank came to repossess the second luxury vehicle, the Range Rover, they discovered Tristan had illegally subleased it to a sketchy third party to make quick cash, which violated the terms of the loan my father had co-signed. The bank threatened to press fraud charges. Here is where the hardest karma of all struck. My parents had a choice. The bankruptcy lawyer I hired for them, a ruthless, brilliant woman named Sarah, found a loophole. Tristan had forged Percival's signature on a separate $30,000 personal loan document. Sarah told my parents that if Percival filed a police report for identity theft and forgery against his own son, they could wipe that specific debt and save a small fraction of their retirement dignity. My father, weak, heartbroken, and finally stripped of his delusions, sat in Sarah's office and wept. But when it came time to sign the police report, he couldn't do it. "He's my boy," Dad whispered, his hands shaking. "I can't send him to jail." By choosing to protect Tristan from criminal charges, my parents accepted total, devastating financial ruin. Chapter 7. Bankruptcy was filed. The bank foreclosed on my childhood home. The beautiful 4-bedroom colonial where I grew up was auctioned off to a property flipper. Liam and I helped pack their boxes. It was a grim, silent affair. We moved my parents into a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment in a dreary, run-down complex on the outskirts of the city. It smelled perpetually of boiled cabbage and old carpet. There was no garden, no driveway, no prestige, and because Tristan had officially declared bankruptcy himself, with no wife, no car, no credit, and no friends willing to harbor a known fraudster, he had nowhere else to go. The golden boy had to move back in with his parents. Today, if you walk into that dingy apartment, you will find a 34-year-old man who used to fly first class to Dubai, sleeping on a lumpy, squeaky pull-out sofa in a living room that barely fits a television. To pay court-ordered restitution for his bounced business checks, Tristan is working 40 hours a week as a customer service representative at a budget car rental kiosk at the airport. He wears a polyester uniform. He has to take the city bus to work because he doesn't own a vehicle. My parents, both pushing 60, had to come out of semi-retirement. Dad works as a greeter at a hardware store, scanning receipts with a bad heart. Mum works shifts at a local dry cleaner. Their entire paychecks go toward basic survival and trying to chip away at the non-dischargeable IRS tax debt they accrued cashing out their retirement for Tristan. The dynamic in that tiny apartment is pure, unadulterated misery. My mother constantly nags Tristan about his lack of ambition, conveniently forgetting she funded his delusions for a decade. Tristan sulks, snaps at them, and bitterly complains about how unfair the world is to visionaries like him. They are trapped together in a prison of their own making. As for me, I set ironclad boundaries. I refused to let their toxicity infect the sanctuary Liam and I had built. I visit my parents once a month for a 2-hour lunch at a cheap diner. I pay for the pancakes, and then I leave. I do not engage with Tristan. I have him blocked on my phone and all social media. When my mother tries to slip in a sob story about how they are struggling to pay the electric bill, I look her dead in the eye, change the subject, and remind myself of the $120,000 ice swan melting at Tristan's wedding. Last month, Liam and I welcomed our first child, a beautiful baby girl named Harper. We brought her home to our quiet, secure house. We have fully funded 529 college savings accounts for her. We have life insurance. As I sat in the nursery yesterday, rocking Harper to sleep, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Aunt Carol. She had sent me a picture she took secretly at the airport. It was a grainy photo of Tristan, standing behind the budget rental counter in his hideous green polyester polo shirt, arguing with a customer over a late fee, looking utterly miserable and defeated. I stared at the photo for a long time. I didn't feel joy or triumph or even vindication. I just felt a profound sense of peace. The universe had finally balanced the scales. I deleted the photo, turned off my phone, and went back to holding my daughter, determined to give her the one thing my parents never gave me: a life built on truth, fairness, and unconditional love. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family dramas and karma stories. Have you ever dealt with a toxic, entitled sibling or parents who played favorites and paid the ultimate price? Drop a comment below and share your experience. I read every single one. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and stay strong.